we've been trying to work, the GROW has been trying to work with the Volga Germans, and I'm not going to get into details, but the GROW board collectively has approved, and two board members, me and another board member from GROW, met and attended one of the Volga German meetings at the Concordia University. And their board was very friendly and also welcomed us, and we talked about maybe getting the two Germans from Russia organizations to work together. And my hope was that GAS, that controls this building, was going to support that effort. You know, working, common German ancestry, doesn't matter where the Germans were. Get a little emotional here. Anyway, supporting that. But GAS, I went to the first board meeting, and they want to talk about it in another month. I sent emails to them, what my proposal was, to both boards, the Volga Germans and the Black Sea Germans GROW. Volga, it's just shorter sometimes when I say Black Sea Germans, Volga Germans. They have acronyms. Anyway, and so they had early my recommendations, and working with both boards and agreement, they tabled it. They wanted to wait another month and talk about it. So I was not a happy person, I'll tell you that, afterwards. And I got two emails that I'm supposed to be quiet. You know, is this Russia or what? You know, so I'm presenting something. I'm probably in trouble now because here I was in the German house, their house, and I'm saying something about what happened. If I sound a little sarcastic, it's because I am. Okay. So we'll see how that works. Yeah, Heinz.
There's an easy way out.
Okay, thank you.
Just incorporate them all into GROW. And then there's no change.
Yeah, I think what we
have more members.
Heinz, yeah, and that's another reason. Heinz brought up a point. They're working together. We're getting smaller and smaller, and that was another reason for doing this. But Heinz, your recommendation is very good to work all together, but I think we would need another Bismarck that unified Germany. Some of it was by might, and some of it was politically, anyway, and we don't have a Bismarck around. And this is just all America, and everybody has their own opinion, and kind of, you know, that's where it is. So how this is going to work out, I don't know. It really upset me. You know, trying my best and to be proactive. Go ahead. Yeah.
Concordia is going out of business.
Yeah, yes, out of business by
So
end of
where are
April.
they going to go?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
they can go right here.
Yeah, that was my thinking.
Easy.
I think it's too logical. Heinz, you're saying it right here. You know, there's another comment. Sorry that this is taking so long because we have a program here coming up. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was there last week, and we're here to check you out.
Okay. So did I tell the truth about me being there at the Volga Germans and being there with the board? And I had another board member. It wasn't just me talking. There was another who was all for talking and trying to work together. And that's Randy Will, who also belongs to the Volga Germans. He was there too. And a board member.
Maybe they just need to add it to their agenda, that maybe there's no problem with gas, they just have to go through their process.
Yeah. Well, if give them a chance.
Yes.
Yeah. By the way, I was at the board meeting. I was there. And before that, a couple of weeks before, I sent an email, you know, in black and white, writing, you know, not in the ear and out the other, in writing to GAS of how we could work together. That was tabled. They need more time to discuss it. Yeah.
But you are a member of the GAS.
Yeah, no, I'm a member of GAS and now a board member. But I don't know how long I will be a board member. That's the other thing. I've been really thinking about it the last couple of days, I can tell you that. Before I can start, I'm going to quit. Both. My thinking is both. The GAS board, and I would become a non-active GAS member. That's in the back of my head. Maybe I'll calm down after we have this meeting. This is getting too political. So let's have the presentation.
This is your order.
This is my brother Leo.
Let's
charming with Adi.
Yes.
Confrontation never resolves anything because I came from a time when we were athletes, and we asked also at that time, the German Americans, at that time the German A Society,
Same,
We
same,
asked
same
for-
group.
support, we asked for support for the athletes.
Yeah.
We were young at one time.
And what did you get?
At that time, we just heard, if you want to play soccer, then you go out there, go to work, so you can buy soccer balls and uniforms.
You buy your
That's
own?
exactly what we did.
Yeah.
And we did one more thing. We entered with dances, and the dances brought us enough revenue to finance a soccer team, but we never received financial help
From,
from the German Aid
from
Society.
gas.
They looked at us as we were greedy for money. No,
Yeah.
we wanted to just play soccer in those days. But that's one thing that we should all remember, no matter how we butt heads, that we celebrate our German heritage.
Yeah.
That's very important to remember that. No matter where you
So-
came. Did you come from Romania? I was born in Latvia, but I still celebrate my Germanness.
Yeah.
As an American, we all came from someplace.
Okay, well put. So I'm calming down, and
Good.
thank you for all the different comments. And we had a great mother. That was very peaceful. So follow her footsteps. Okay, we're going to start the program, and the program is about Bessarabia, and there are my sister-in-law Gudrun, whose family was in Bessarabian, and then Bruno's and Isolde. There's two sisters in their families, and then Bruno's family was also in Bessarabian, and they're going to talk about Bessarabian. I haven't had a chance with all the stuff that I'm talking about going on, and I haven't had a chance. I wanted them to talk a little bit about how at the end of World War II, what happened to them, and just a little bit. Bruno wrote a whole book about it. I haven't talked to them about it, but maybe just say a little bit where they ended up. Gudrun's family was lucky. Bruno's family, terrible. What happened to them? Okay, so I'm going to do the slides, and okay, I'm going to do the slides for them, and Gudrun volunteered to be first.
Just to get it over with.
No. Everybody came here to hear your family story.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, it's quite a story, but not like Bruno's. That will be, what, do I need that?
Yeah,
Yes.
up in the
Yes.
back. Yeah, and then she's
Yes.
taping it, and
Do you want a
You're taping
microphone?
it?
Do you want a microphone
No,
stand? Do you
Oh,
want it?
well, I'm going to do a little reading in case I forget everything I was going to say, so.
okay.
Yeah. I think you can hear me, right?
No.
In the back,
Okay.
and I'll get the pictures up there. So
No. Okay.
you tell me when you want the pictures.
You have to hold it close.
Oh,
There.
really
Yeah.
close, okay, yes, okay. So anyway, like you said, I'm Gudrun, and again, I don't have the gift of gab like my husband Leo and my brother-in-law Adi. Public speaking is not my gift, but here we go. So first of all, I'm thankful to Adi for getting me the book, and you didn't bring it. I
forgot.
I forgive you. But anyway, it's called Emilia, the girl from Bessarabian. And so that was quite a gift because, you know, when you're young, you don't, I heard all these stories from mom, grandparents, and so on, and you never really listen. So,
There's the book behind you.
oh, there it is, yeah, that's it. And it was written by, I think, a granddaughter who lives in the east, and she is in the, was in the west. But anyway, so I want to thank him, first of all, for getting me going and to refresh my memories. And so, and to Barbara, his wife, I wanted to show you, she did all this research. I have pages of this at home on both sides, my Schlup's family and my Cow's family. And without that, I could look back and see where, you know, she started in 1600s, but I won't go back that far. So anyway, so I'm going to start with, before reading the book, you know, Barb's work really helped me to do some research. So my family, most of them migrated from Bessarabien actually in 1918 to late 20s to the Dobrudscha. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with
There's
that,
the map.
which, does it show?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right below the green,
In green,
Dobrudscha.
yep.
And they lived in the little town later in Kobadin. But and part of my family in 1907, my grandfather's brother and sister, out of 9 children, those 2 went to Argentina. So I have to tell you more about that story when we visited South America years ago. And some of my mom's side went to US and Canada, so about that same time. But anyway, so my Schlaps family, Oma was born in 1885 in Friedenthal, so I'm just going to say a few of the towns.
Yeah.
Friedenthal, which Bruno I think will really cover, and that's Peace Valley, and I'm sure you all understand German, right? Friedenthal, no? Okay, so Friedenthal means Peace Valley, and my great-great-grandfather was born in 1859 in Neu-Alzis, and his wife, my grandmother, in 1861 in Alt-Alzis. And my cow's side, my great-great-grandfather was born in 1780 in Tarutino, which you'll read a lot about.
Here's 56, Tarutino.
Tarutina, yeah,
And let's see, Friedenthal.
right.
I can reach it almost, I'm almost tall
Yeah.
enough.
So, and then my cow's opa was born in 1875 in Paris. And so before I
And
got into the book, I
and
did a little
Paris-
research.
Paris is there.
Right there, yeah. I did a little more research on the internet and read that in 1806 to 1812 was the Russian-Turkish War. And that took place at that time. And then in 1812, the Tsar Alexander acquired the country Bessarabien, and that from the Turks. And it's like they were, I think, because of the war, the conflict, right? They gave it up, or he bought it from them, or anyway, that part now is called Moldova, and part of it is Ukraine, and it's bounded by Romania and the Black Sea, and you can see it up there, right? So before this land was used for pastoral nomadic people, came through with sheep and so on, and they were called the Nogai Tatars, a Turkic people, and these later settled then in Turkey when the Germans and they all came into that area. And my Oma always talked about the word Tatars, and that was that group. So there were still some that lived in their villages later also, right? So the Tsar wanted to put this area into agriculture, and he needed farmers, of course. So where would he go? The German farmers. He brought them back from Baden-Württemberg, from Bayern, Bavaria, Prussia, and Alsace, France. Yeah, Lorraine, right. And so the Russian government guaranteed them, special privileges. They got 65 hectare land, and for 10 years they didn't have to pay taxes. And even the poor families received like 270 rubles to help them at the beginning. So the settlers actually, the war lasted 1806 to 1812, and then by the time you got the farmers there, they settled in that area in 1814. That's when it began. And the reason for leaving Germany, and you probably all know that's why they continuously moved from area to area, they escaped compulsory military service, serfdom, the oppressive regime, and crop failures in their area, and high taxes, land shortage in Germany at that time, and of course religious reasons also.
Germany didn't exist at that time.
Right, so what was it called
It
at that
was a
time?
collection of.
Different, it's like Austria-Hungarian,
Germany was
right.
established in 1871.
Thank you. Yes, all right, thank you. day.
Absolutely right.
So many immigrants arrived between 1814 1816, and of course it was a difficult time adjusting, like it was for all of us that came over to this country. It took time to learn the language. The food was different. All they got was mamalica, which my oma always talked about, mamalica. It was made from corn because, of course, they didn't have the rye and the wheat in that area yet. And they needed to build houses, which Bruna will talk a little bit about, which were built at that time from clay and grass. And of course, the soil had to be tilled and make it fertile. And so later, after the first harvest, the rye and wheat, they could make their bread, which they enjoyed. So during the first decades, the immigrants experienced disease, which, you know, was then cholera, diphtheria, smallpox, and also the forces of nature. You know, they had earthquakes and drought and floods and crop failures, but they survived. So this story is about Emilia, and also from that time, a child of these German settlers and her survival. It's really a wonderful book. So Emilia, I'll tell you just a little bit about it. You'll need to read it to get all the details. But Emilia was born in 1894 in Teplitz. Her father died in 1905. And a year later, the mother was trying to survive with her 5 children. And in those days, the women couldn't survive. They didn't have any way to work. They were, you know, just took care of the family. And so there was a brother-in-law, but he had his own family problems, so he couldn't take them in. So a pastor from that area and his wife found families in different surrounding villages for these 5 children. Of course, they were all split up. They weren't together. It was so sad. So Emilia was fortunate because she was adopted by a wealthier family and they didn't have children, and their name was Glücksmann. He was a cabinet maker in Alt-Elf. Is that up there? Alt-Elf? And so he was a cabinet maker, also farmer, of course, but he had workers, maids, and so on. And she also had to work as a young child, already help, but she was fortunate enough to get education. They educated her through 8th grade, which not all farm children had that opportunity. They had to help at home. But anyway, Alt-Elf was a steppe, which is like the prairie of grassland, where many of these settlers farmed, and there weren't any forests. They used manure to heat, which Bruno probably will talk about too, and they grew lots of corn, which they called mamaliga, which was kind of a corn mush. And instead of potatoes, which the Germans were also loved and were used to, they later had those also. And watermelons, I found that interesting. She talked about Haubus, which my Oma always said. Habusa, do you remember that? No? Anyway, so Emily was fortunate enough to go through 8th grade. She was confirmed and then considered at age 14 to be an adult. At 18 then, she met a young man named Alexander Spies, and he was a great match also because his family was a little wealthier, and in those days, you know, parents put children together, you know, you didn't have a choice. This family has that, and that family has this, we have more land, and so you get married. So anyway, so she had that marriage planned in 1914, but in 1914, the Archduke Ferdinand, heir of the Austrian-Hungarian throne, was murdered by the Serbian nationalists. So then a conflict broke out, and the Second World War started. First World War. No, yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm ahead of time. I wasn't born yet. Yeah, right. So then, Alexander was called into the army, and many other young Bessarabische Germans, you know. And, you know, it was really difficult for them because they didn't quite know who am I fighting for? Am I fighting for the Germans or the Russians, you know? But they went, they did their duty, and in the meantime, the old men and women and children who left on these farms to continue farming, and the Russians had confiscated grain and cattle and horses from these farms to supply to the army, right? So anyway, Alexander returned. His marriage finally took place in January 1919, and the Russians then relinquished the Bessarabian steppe to the Romanians, so it became part of Romania. So that was a time of turmoil. You know, lots of things changed. The monetary system changed. They had different money. The school instructions now were in Russian, in Romanian, Romanian instead of Russian. But Emily was married happily. Life went on. She had children. She was able to reunite as an adult then with her siblings, her birth mother again. And then in the 1930s, she and her husband, there was a season of drought, many, many years. And so they decided to resettle in Glückstadt, where they found more rain and the farming conditions were better. And then in 1939, the family realized, or heard more from the German about that area, that anyway, Bessarabia was still a little more like the Middle Ages. You know, they still had horse and buggy, where in the German area they already had cars and better schools, theaters, and so on. And then Hitler came into power and the resettlements began homeward to the Reich. So their final destination then at the end of World War II ended similar to our families. Only Emilia experienced a little sadness when they were in Germany, but recovered, and she then settled near the town of Heilbronn, and that's where she passed away, or that's where she ended her life. So they traveled, though, to the Reich by train, where my family fled by horse and wagon, but not from Romania, but later from Poland. So I wasn't born yet, because I was born April 1945. So I didn't know anything about that time, or didn't experience with them, only what I heard and read in my Opa's Tagebuch, which was published in several issues of the Deutscher Deutschen calendar here. So I went back and reread that just to, and talked to Bruno Isolde to kind of help me through getting this history a little bit straight. And so, anyway, when I read through the book and I heard of some of the towns, you know, I brought back many memories just of my Oma's time too, and that was like the I don't know, anybody from here came from Bessarabia? No, no one. So these towns, so you don't really care these town names, but. You know, there are like the villages of Atzis and Paris and Teplitz and Alt-Elf-Neu. Atzis and Sarata is another one that my Oma always talked about. But they had village names like Hoffnungstal, which was Hope Valley. You know, they of course Germanized everything, or the names. Gnadental was Grace Valley. Lichtental was Light Valley. Horntal must have been Horn Valley. And then they had Josefsdorf, which who knows who that Josef was that they named it after. And, but have you ever heard, you know, they were pretty much Schwäbisch because they came from the southern part of Germany. And Oma always talked about Käsknüffler. You ever heard that term, Käsknüffler? Yeah, I think Deutsche, they still make those too, and my mom did too. But anyway, yeah, so my family then, or part of them, went then on their way. Here's the story, their story. So when Hitler came to power, and then in 1940, the Germans from the East European countries were asked to come back to the Reich. Heimholung is the word for that, right? And our family, not sure exactly, probably 1940, They settled in Austria first, and my sister mentioned a little bit that it wasn't in my Opa's diary or journal, that they came through on the Donau. Yeah, by boat, and then who knows how they got to Austria. They spent the first 3 years in a refugee camp. That was just right after 1940. And then came the offer of resettlement in an area called Wategau in Poland. And they lived in a little place called Klein Ernsthof, where the land was then taken away from the Polish farmers and the Germans were settled there. So in January 1945, as the Soviet Union advanced towards Germany, we were ordered to return to leave Poland at that time. And I'm sure the Polish people were happy to get their land back, their farms back if they did, but anyway. So they were ordered to return and had to leave Poland. So my father was in the war, and my grandmother, my mother, and my two sisters, with another family, set out on covered horse and wagon. They had 4 wagons to be. And great-grandfather too, because he died on the way. But anyway, and great-grandfather, I forgot them. So with 4 horses, and they were loaded, and it was heading towards the west. And after weeks of travel, it was a really, really cold, harsh winter, and the roads were icy, and the horses couldn't even hardly walk and to carry that load or to pull that load. So they had to get rid of a lot of their belongings, yes. And so our wagons then reached, finally, after weeks and weeks of travel, they reached Kleinsicht by Kreis Brandenburg, which is near Berlin. That's where I was born. So without my father, in the meantime, my great-grandfather died on the trip, right? They had to stop in hospital. There was a hospital. Where was that? Yeah, and he passed away. And so great-grandmother, grandmother, and my mom and 2 sisters had to stop in Kleinsicht because my mother was expecting, and that was me. Can you imagine? And near Belling. So my brave mother had to endure the childbirth without my father, who was away in a war camp, prisoner of war camp, and not sure who took my mother in that little town of Kleinsicht. My grandfather kind of left that part out in his journal. I kept looking for that. That was such a great event, and he didn't mention my birth at all there. But anyway, I was born there because we went back, Leo and I, to look that little town up, and we visited there. And I looked at the 20 houses that were still there, and didn't want to knock on every door, and they wouldn't remember me. But anyway, so she endured that. I just can't imagine these strong women in those days. So finally, our family came to America with wonderful sponsors. We had some family here, and what am I saying? We're not there yet. We came to Lindachden and Kreis Schwäbisch Gmünd, which is near Stuttgart, and that's where we settled in. And I understand I celebrated my first birthday there then. So see, so that would have been in 1946. And then later, and thanks to our wonderful family sponsors here in America, we arrived here in Portland September 1955, and our family started our life here, so with the 3 girls. So coming back to Argentina, I wish I would have known a little bit more then, but after hearing for years that we had relatives in Argentina and my parents visiting them in St. Martin in the Pampa in the 90s, sometime in the early 90s maybe. And a few years before, Adi and Leo received an invitation to Brazil, or a few years after my parents were there, they received an invitation from Brazil from their aunt and uncle to celebrate, they were celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary. So I decided to join the two men, and I insisted that I went to visit my relatives in Argentina. I thought, well, how far is that from Brazil, right? But anyway, we were able to do that. So Leo and I, we left Ari. Leo and I then flew to Bahia Blanca, to near the Pampa, or in the Pampa actually, and I had a joyful reunion with my wonderful relatives. They came, there was a little airport in Bahia Blanca, just a little hut, or not very large, with large window, and all these people were in the window, waiting. When we got off the plane, and it was joyful, really. And on the way home, they came in different cars. So on the way home, on the way to their homes, they split us up, and so Leo shared with me later that they, surprisingly, they still spoke German, and they remembered all these German children's songs. And so they made him sing the songs with them in the car on the way home, he said, but that was really wonderful, wonderful trip. So that's pretty much, oh, and that is part of, that's my family, a part of them in 1907. 1907. I didn't want to bring, I have lots of pictures, family pictures, but I didn't want to share those. This is kind of from that time. I just put myself into that time. That was just the survival of these Germans in those days, right? Yeah, so sorry if I got some of the history mixed up. World War I, World War II. They were always in conflict. So sad. And we're still in conflict. Why? Yeah, so.
The German nature.
German nature.
Some of it.
Yeah, so there you go.
the warrior genes.
It is a warrior, yes, yeah.
The Heinz.
Everybody.
Heinz, yeah.
You mentioned that people living in Bessarabia,
Uh-huh.
that they were drafted into the German army?
No, they were trying to get, they were drafted in the Romanian army. Yeah, no, Romanian army, yeah.
They were drafted on the river.
Actually, it was Russian.
Russian army.
It was Russian army.
Even though, well, I'm gonna bring it up a little bit.
Yeah, it was
You know,
Russian
like,
army.
the promise was, when they moved, before they immigrated, one of the promises was freedom of religion,
Oh, yeah.
freedom of the military.
That's the
But you know, like every government, you never keep the word in.
The Tsar promised that.
So that's what happened. So there were some drafted already and, by the Russians.
Yeah.
But then later on, like in my, after my time, when it, after 18, well, I'm gonna get into
Yeah,
that.
you get into that. But it was, you know, the Besavendeutsch, it was Russian. They didn't know, who are we really fighting for? We're Germans, but we have to fight for the Russians, you know?
Yeah,
That
but
was
there were
a
Soviet
conflict.
citizens, right?
Were they
Well,
Bessarab?
we'll wait until what-
Yeah.
what these,
When they Soviet. At that time they were,
Then later on, we were Romanian citizens.
right, as they became Romanian.
Dankeschön. You could see that Gudrun wrote, studied and prepared for the presentation. She had it all written down, and so thank you for all the effort in putting that together. And then describing a little bit of how they ended up in West Germany. And thanks for doing that too. Okay, here's Bruno, and he was a little older, and so his memory. So you get it's the straight story from Bruno. I have pictures down there, just the way you want it, and yeah, just tell me, and I'll show the pictures, whichever you want.
Well, hello everybody. I hope I can keep you awake. First I'm gonna talk a little bit about Bessarabian. There are quite a few things that I remember personally, not just from books, that I still remember. course, Bessarabia, that territory used to be a Russian territory. And the Russian government promised those Germans, but it was not cultivated land. It was the area was kind of very flat, a lot of flat land, but no trees either. The land was just laying there, was not being cultivated, was just a lot of brush and weeds there.
What year?
Uh,
The year.
What year?
What year?
What time?
What year?
But I'm talking now before our people moved in.
Oh,
So there was in 1800s,
yeah.
in the early 1800s. That land was not being used. There were hardly any people living in it. But the Russian government promised those German immigrants a certain amount of land. Every farmer, because the people they moved in were all farmers. And the Russian government promised them a certain amount of land. And what really got our people to go was the freedom of religion. Because in Germany itself, there was a lot of fighting going on between the Catholics and the Lutherans and all that. Here there was a freedom, they promised them freedom of religion and freedom of the military. So that was a big reason why they wanted to go. So the early 1800s, that's when the first people started moving in. The most of them in our area in Bessarabia, they came from the southern part of Germany, Stuttgart area. So, because later on, the ones that did survive moved back again to that area in Germany later on. But like the beginning was really terrible. Even there, they promised them some help, the Russian government promised them some help. There was very little help. There were no towns really available where the people could move to. They were just moving. They were actually living in holes for quite a few years, digging holes into the ground because there was no housing available. So things were very, very tough for them to start. Even though they had some land, they didn't have the equipment to cultivate it. They needed some horses. They needed something to move the equipment. Well, but even the equipment they got from the Russian government was so old-fashioned that they didn't do much good. So at the beginning was terrible. Of course, a lot of them died. And like you used to say, it used to be erst der Tod und dann das Brot. First death and then bread. And that's really what happened to our people at that time. But they wouldn't give up. And they did improve. They started producing, even fabricating some tools, farm tools, which was easier to work the land. And the land, that's one thing. Once they got it, some of the, there was just weeds and shrubbery on that land. Once they pulled all that stuff out, once got it going, the things they planted started to grow very, very beautiful. And they were, at first they were raising a lot of weeds and also corn. And later on I'm going to mention too about corn. It was very important for them to have the corn. So anyhow, I better keep on going about that. So things finally started to improve. They started building their own houses, but then again the building material was limited too. There was hardly any wood available. So, and they couldn't afford real bricks, anything like that. So they were making their own building material too. they were making their own bricks, and they were, well, it was not a real burnt brick, it was out of clay, and straw was chopped up and mixed, and then they had little forms, just the size of a regular brick. They put that stuff in it, pushed it out, and let it dry, and then after it was dry, they were pretty solid. That's what they were using as a building material. So usually, I know, I don't know at the beginning, but later on, like our own house, the gable was natural rocks, but only the gable and the foundation. But so that was one thing, you know, what they were using, but they all started to build their houses. Amazingly, if I just think back to what I still saw when I was just reading how they survived. It was very, very hard on them, but they did. But of course, they were also very, very religious. Religion was very important to them. And maybe that was really something to help them too, even though of course they couldn't afford it. But then in the early 1900s, well, I should have mentioned that the town I was born in was Friedenstadt. I didn't mention that. And Friedenstadt itself was established in 1834. Exactly 100 years before I was born. I was born in 1934. So anyhow, things started getting better. They built little villages. Even those villages were growing. There were, one thing too, of course, they had a lot of children too. All the families had a lot of children. But unfortunately, there was hardly any family that didn't lose children who were dying. My own family, we lost 2 girls while they were little. Well, by birth. They died already. But there were 2 purposes. 2 was that having more children, free labor. You know, the children, they were only a certain age, and they had to go out and work.
They had no child labor laws, yeah.
So that was one, and then the most of men, especially, they wanted boys. They wanted more boys than girls because they could do a better job on a farm. Even my father was an exception. He wanted girls because he said at least they don't have to serve in the military. He hated to put on a uniform, and unfortunately, later on in the Second World War, he died in a uniform. And he said, with girls, you don't have to go to war. But then there were 2 girls. Well, I was the oldest, and then the second child was a girl. She died. The 3rd child was a boy. He survived. He's still around. The 4th child was a girl again. She died. And then at the end, there was 1 more girl that was born, but then he was dead 6 days before she was born. He died. He got killed in the war. Some things I want to mention too, talk a little bit about. Some of the things that people did, how some of the habits, some of the customs, and so on. like about the cooking part. Oh, one more thing too I wanted to mention yet too, that with the buildings, the roofs, like I said, I mentioned earlier, the kind of what you call it, a brick, but then the roof, of course, the frame was wood, but then they didn't have tiles or anything for the roof, so they were using reed, and they had quite a bit of reed growing, and there was some areas where a lot of that stuff, and that was growing really high, and they were obviously let it dry, and they were using that as a roof.
Picture behind it.
Oh yeah, that's the stuff right there. Yeah, it was. That's what they were using for the roof. It lasted much longer than just straw.
It's still used today. Some parts of the
Something else that they actually, just like the farm equipment. At first it was just so poor, that's why it was so hard for them to get some of the crops going. Just like the plows, when they were plowing, they had wooden shares, you know, and they were breaking. But then even they developed some metal ones, and that really improved the farming all over. It was doing such a better job, going much deeper than with the other ones. So they did real well with that.
Bruno, what are they doing in this picture?
Now this here, this is what when the wheat was cut, and they stacked it outside on the field until it was completely dry. And then they brought it in, and they spread it out. And every farm, they had a pretty good piece of ground. And on that ground, that was really hard. It was almost like an asphalt, you know, almost was really hard. And so they spread out the wheat, and then they used some rollers and went over that thing. And then they went over it a few times, and then they took some forks, flipped it over, went over it again, and it actually got the most of the wheat out. And it was just laying in on the ground, and then he took the straw and just on the side and put it in big, huge piles, because there's something else. They were using all the straw. Sometimes even they had to use a little bit even to feed the animals later on, because if you didn't have enough hay. But straw was used a lot just for the stoves, for burning, for heat.
mattresses too.
Oh, but this
might be different.
this is something too. Like I mentioned, there was no hardly any wood. So what did the people use for heat? You know? So what they did, they used the manure from the animals. They used it, they had only most just once a year, they had it stacked up. And then they took the manure, mixed it with some straw, and then they did the same thing like when you were harvesting. They were spreading it out, only to about 6 thick, maybe 6 inches, 6 inches thick. They spread it out. And then they were cutting it. Again, in like, well, actually more like a square, maybe 10 by 10. Yeah, see, they were cutting. Here they were cutting it. Yeah, and they dried that. And that was one of the main stuff for heating.
Cow manure?
And that's one thing too, coming back to the land, since that land was still so good, they didn't need no fertilizer. They didn't use no manure, they didn't use no fertilizer. That land had not been used for so long that it was really, it was a wonderful land to raise stuff. Here, that's something you don't see, actually you don't see much, but that's what I was talking about when they were making the bricks. They had big containers, and they were mixing too, they were clay, they were using clay, that clay and with straw mixed up, a mass, and anyhow, that's what they were doing here. Yeah, that's how they were doing it stuff. Oh, that's something else that was the baking. Of course, there was a lot of, people ate a lot of bread. Bread was probably one of the main things that they were living on. Of course, the most of them, they had their own flour, so it was a cheap stuff. With flour, of course, they were producing a lot of other stuff. But bread was one, and they did it usually, when you can see the round loaves. Sometimes I was a little surprised too, that how did the women know in the oven, when the oven had the right temperature? You know, today you don't have a thermostat, how do you know how to bake?
Yeah, I can answer that a little bit. I know from Italy they have similar stuff, and they take a little bit of flour and throw it in the oven, and if it turns brown, then it's good. If it burns,
Yeah, I was always kind of amazed how they knew that there was the right temperature to bake. And they had to bake a lot because they ate, well, they had all the big families then, and so they had to do a lot of, at least once a week, the women were baking.
What was the?
And then there was,
Sorry for interrupting. What was the flour used? Wheat or rye for the bread? The dough, either wheat or rye?
no, there was no rye. I'm surprised too that there was no rye, it was only wheat. It was only white bread. In fact, I got a little thing there too that I'm going to throw in. When we moved out later on the ship, when they got out of Bismarck and on the ship, we were on the ship there, and they had some rye bread, only rye. And our people wouldn't eat it, they throw it away and said, you can't eat that black stuff. They were not used, they were absolutely not used to rye. It was only wheat. Yeah. One more thing about the bread. They had no yeast. So what did they do for the bread to rise? To dough the rice? Well, they were using some of the dough that was left over, or kept it, made some little balls like that.
Right
Do
behind.
we have, oh yeah, here's the picture. And they let that dry. And that, after that was dry, that was actually working like yeast.
It was a starter.
It started, it got the dough rising. And that's what they all, yeah, because that's what they did here. They were making those little,
Yeast. Yeast
whatever you call it.
Yeast substitute.
I don't even know what, I don't even remember what you call it. One thing, like I mentioned too, was corn. Corn has been used for many things, for eating, for feeding the animals, and everything off the corn, like the leaves, when they took the leaves off the corn, they were taking some of it, more the inside of it, which was a softer leaf, for the mattresses. See, some of them were using straw, but actually, from a corn, those leaves, they were lasting much, they were softer and lasting longer than straw. So that's
Is that the corn
what
silk?
we were using it, a lot of that for. And then the cobs, that's another thing. I mean, there was nothing thrown, and the people in those days, I don't think you throw anything away. There was a use for everything yet. But we today throw everything goes to the garbage. They couldn't believe that. Yeah, that's enough. That's some a fun thing right here. And that was mostly younger people. And when the corn was all dry, like it was here, they brought it in, they got together in a bigger room with some houses, brought everything in, and they were stripping it, stripping the leaves off. And why they all love to do that, the young guys, the girls too, obviously, that every so often, on a corn, some of them that was red, normally was yellow, the corn, but some of them were red. And then if a guy got one that was red, well, usually he was sitting next to a girl that he liked, and then he got a free kiss. So everybody was going for those red ones because that's when he got a free kiss. Actually, that was a lot of fun doing that too, not only work.
That's where lipstick comes from.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun to do that. They just like again, even like I said, with the corn, there was everything was used. Something, even with your iron, we didn't. I don't know why, but they didn't plug it in the iron to plug in electricity. They were using those old irons, and you had to heat it. They had to get some heat in it. So they were even using some of the corn cobs too. They were getting them hot. They shoved that inside, and that got the iron hot to do some ironing. So like I guess with corn, it was very, very important. There were so many different uses for it that had in absolutely no waste. Because if they were lucky enough, they could use it as a burning material, But even for the burning material, even the straw, a lot of straw was used to be a burning material. And that's why they kept it, or they kept right on the farm. After threshing, after they were done harvesting, they kept the straw right there, close by. Now there is something, of course, that I guess all especially the old Omas, they all did a lot of knitting. Because the most of them also had sheep, so we had our own wool. And so we were spinning and making their own wool. And I don't think there was any woman they wouldn't know how to knit. how to make socks and well, clothes anyhow. You know, and that's something you could see again and again and again, that old master were doing that, you know. Was another picture out here?
There's some churches, pictures here, Friedenstown.
Well, okay, but that's something too, like I mentioned, church was very important. In the early 1900s then, Friedenthal built that church. It was a beautiful church. And it was just very, very important to those people. Church was very, very, religion was very important.
So this was a
Huh?
Lutheran church?
Yeah.
Lutheran.
Oh yeah, since you mentioned Luther, there was one thing, which I think was silly, but that's how it was, that in our town, Friedenthal, there were Lutherans and a few Baptists. The Baptists, they had only a prayer house, they didn't have a church,
I got the picture.
because there was only a small group. But in our town, there was not one Catholic. They were not, well, actually, they were really not allowed to marry. A Lutheran was not allowed to marry a Catholic. To this day, I think it was silly, but that's how it was. It was just, Costa Rica, there was some other towns that were only Catholics, you know. But our town was only Lutheran. You know, we like having a few Baptists.
Could you marry the Baptists? Could you marry a Baptist girl?
I guess, I don't know. Yeah, see that's
Baptist.
the Baptist, yeah,
Prayer,
yeah.
chapel.
But there were not too many Baptists in our town. You know what? Another thing about some of the customs there, and even my parents kept that up even later on yet, that I remember it so well, that they worked very, very hard, many hours, very hard. On Sundays, nobody worked on a Sunday. Sunday was a no-no. Sunday you had to go to church. Even if you didn't go to church, you were not allowed to work. Because boy, somebody will really let you have it if they caught you working on a Sunday. And well, in all honesty, it's only I still do it today. Yeah, very seldom work on a Sunday. So we try to get our work done during the week. Well, they felt, you know, if you work, you need one day a week to rest. And so on Sunday, no work. Music, of course, was important too. Especially in my family too. My mom always sang in a church choir. And then my dad, that was from Friedenthal, the band. And from top, the second guy, the top row, the second guy from the right, that's my father.
Hey, he just looks like you.
So in our house, music was always important. And this would see, that was another thing, of course, especially for the younger people, that the music, they were getting together and just singing, you know, and because actually not too many people did have instruments. Instruments were so expensive too, musical instruments. But the singing, of course, it was free. And there was a lot of singing going on from church songs to folk songs, you know. It was just, and I think it was a nice thing that they could do those things.
There's some cemetery.
One. Did you have a picture of the? Oh yeah, that's part of a cemetery. But of course that cemetery. Oh, by the way, you too. That beautiful church that you just saw during the communists took over. It was just torn down. There's nothing left of that church. And then the cemetery, and that's one of my, actually, aunt found out when they went back quite a few years ago. The cemetery is gone. There's nothing left. You can't see nothing anymore. And when like I said, quite a few years ago, my auntie went back for a visit, and they went across. There was also a little river going by Friedenthal, the Shark, they called it. And there was a bridge over it. So they walked over it and she looked a little closer. Well, here they found out that a lot of the gravestones, or when they were ripping them out, they were building up that bridge with them. And some of them you can still see under the writing on the side of the
There's a picture of this behind you. There's a
yeah,
wall with
that's it. Yeah,
gravestones.
that's it. That's my aunt actually. They went back later on, and she found that, she saw that. That's what they were using.
Gravestones to build the wall.
So it's all gone.
Bridge building.
Yeah.
Yeah, grave robbers.
Okay, when was,
They also,
what year?
well, like all those things, of course, what Stroman was just eliminated.
He had a question.
What
Mike.
year? What year?
When they took the pictures of the stones. roughly.
I don't know exactly, but I would say it's at least 20 years back. Roughly 20 years back. Quite a while ago.
So what you're saying,
Yeah.
the
See,
Soviets,
I don't remember that what year it was, but because when they went, of course, like I said, he couldn't find the cemetery, it's completely gone, and he happened to see it, and then he took those pictures and yeah, that's how it was.
so what?
But then I tell you, people there in Bessarabien, they were hardworking, but they were happy with their lives. They were doing the farming, even a hard time when they started, they overcame that. And the most of those little towns in Bessarabia, not just our town of Friedenthal, they were all really nice, clean, upkept towns. They claimed that later on when the German commission came in shortly before we left, they said, before you went into town, you could tell already which was a German town. You could tell right away. That's what Germany lived in. And but there was another thing about, because there were some other nationalities living there too, and but then there was quite a bit of jealousy too, that the Germans were doing so well, because they were getting way ahead of all the other nationalities. So there was quite a bit. At first, when we left, and they were happy, but of course later on they were sorry that our people left. But because we see what happened too, that land that actually Russia gave to the Bessarabians first to our people was not enough anymore, so they needed more land. So wherever they could, as soon as they had a little more money, they bought more land from the other nation, other people there. Well, they didn't have to sell it, but they sold it, and then later on, they were kind of angry at our people because they owned so much more. And then again, whoever land was, they were just richer. If they had more land, they were richer than the rest of them. Did we have any more?
No, I think
That's about it, I think,
yeah,
Susan.
yeah. If you can tell us a little bit, how your family left Bessarabia, that might be interesting. Just a little bit, what happened to you personally,
Well,
a little bit.
yeah. Well, like I said, our people, they were very happy there. Nobody really wanted to leave. But then, well, actually 1918, late 18, that's when Bessarabia went back to Romania. It was not Russian territory anymore. And for it was a little hardship too for our people first, because now they had also, well, they were actually Russian citizens before that. Now they had to become Romanian citizens. And even with the language, was a difference.
After World War I.
So, but today they got to get along pretty well with the Romanians. There was no, but then the only thing too, like I mentioned about the military, even through on the Russian rule, there was a draft. That again, I don't know. I couldn't tell you what year when the draft started, and they were drafting those German boys. When they were available, able to be drafted them. And there were quite a few of them killed in a war too, as Russian soldiers. But then when the Romanians took over, of course, the Romanians started to draft them too. And that's when my dad was drafted too in the Romanian army. And he hated every bit of it. And that's something too later on, he said, I'm never ever gonna put a uniform on. Because he hated the military. We said that the military doesn't bring anything good. And that's like I mentioned, he didn't want no boys, he wanted only girls. Because he didn't have to go into the military.
So Adi, did you want to know about his life after
Yeah, a
they
little bit.
left?
Yeah, how you left
Tell
the
briefly.
end of World War II and.
Well, okay, I can go a little bit into that, how he left then. Then in 1940, that's when Russia came again. They were military stronger again in Romania. They had a bigger hammer, so they told the Romanians to get the heck out of there. So this is our land, which originally it was. You know that. It was Russian territory originally. So they gave Romanians exactly 3 days to get out. So they had no choice. The Romanian people, the military, they had to get out of Bessarabia. And then, of course, we kind of knew, or our people kind of knew, if the communists take over, well, things are really going to change. Everybody was really kind of scared what will happen if the communists take over. So, because, they had the experience already with the Volga Germans, what happened to them, they were lost everything anyhow, were deported and so on. But then they got the news that Hitler and Stalin had an agreement. They signed an agreement that all the people of German origin, they could leave for Germany. Now this, we were never kicked out. Some people think we were kicked out, and we were not kicked out. Actually, our people left voluntarily. But the choice they had, stay under communism or leave. So in our town, Friedensdal, there was not one person that stayed behind. They all left. It took us about a half a year before all the paperwork was done, and then all the people left. Supposedly to Germany. Well, there again, don't trust the government too much. Instead, because of Germany, they first put us in some resettlement camps. They were not prison camps, they were just resettlement camps, different areas, wherever you could put some people in. My family, personally, we were in Yugoslavia then for almost a year. And I saw this, they were in Austria for 3 years in a resettlement camp. And then finally, they said, okay, now you find they're really going to go to Germany. Baloney. What happened? Well, Hitler, by that time, the German government overran Poland. So Hitler felt, well, that's German property now. He was occupying Poland. So he felt, that's Germany now. So instead of moving us to Germany, they moved us to Poland. They gave us, and that was another unfair thing that happened there. They kicked the Polish people out of their farms, and then put our people in. Took it away from the Polish people and put our people in. It was very, very hard but our people, they didn't want it either. They were very unhappy too, because they knew that was not really, it was Polish land, you know. It belonged to some people. But they didn't have, either they had to stay in a camp, or they had to take over. And then in 41, that's when they moved us to Poland. And they called it a Watykaw, the area where we went through. And then again, the start was bad because the place we got there, we got a house there, but it was almost unlivable. And so after the first winter, my dad started to build a new house, new barn. And everything was new at that place. Unfortunately, and in 44, my dad got drafted in the German army now, which he hated so much, which was a little bit, well, he eventually probably would have been drafted anyhow. But like I mentioned, he said, I'm never going to put on another uniform. And while we were in Poland, they were pushing our people to join the Nazi party. And if you didn't join, well, you were almost sure to be drafted. So my dad refused to join the Nazi party. So they drafted him. And he was gone about 3 months. He went to the Eastern Front fighting Russia, and then he was dead. He was killed already. He was, like I just mentioned too about our little girl, he got killed the 28th of February, and she was born the 6th of March. About a week, she was born a week after he was dead already. So he never saw, even he always wanted a girl. Oh, he didn't see his girl. He was dead already when she was born. Actually, in Poland, we didn't have it bad. We had a pretty decent life. We had the Polish people, I call them our Polish people, because they were working for us now there. And we got along real well with them. We had no problems with them. And like that one younger lady, she was around 18. She was our maid then, and she was living with us in our house. And later on, I went back to Poland, but 15 years ago. She was still around too. She still remembers quite a few things too. So we had a good relationship with our people. But then in 45, when the German army was retreating from the Eastern Front, and we knew it doesn't look good, but there's nothing, we couldn't go anywhere, or we were not allowed either. In fact, we are prohibited to leave. And so it done in 45 and well, in January, no, 46 in January. No, 45. We knew that we could actually hear already the shooting going on. And we were ready. We had a wagon all loaded up. Yeah, I had the wagon ready. I had the horses ready. I put some new studs into their shoes so they would slip because it was winter time. We were ready to leave. But we were told you cannot leave until they tell you. The government will tell you when to leave. We wanted to get out of Germany now. But one disadvantage we had was we were pretty close to the border. We were farther back in Poland, farther east. And quite more of a distance away from Germany. And we were ready to go, but we were not permission to leave. Until one night, I don't remember exactly the date, they knocked on our door and said, get in a wagon and get going, leave. So we did. And, but then, because the streets were completely full of ice, snow and ice, it was very hard to move. And then the German retreating army, they had the right of way, not the women and children, the wagon. The army had the right of way. So we had to pull over to let the army go by so they could go back faster than we could. So we were on a road then for about I don't remember exactly, but around 3 or 4 days. And so that was an afternoon already. And there was a lot of noise going on. Oh, we were hit by low flying airplane already, but fortunately none of us got killed. But then there was some noise going on again. They told us, move over to your right on the street. So we dipped with our wagon, and there was a whole colony of wagons, one wagon after the other. It was not just us. So we pulled over and stopped. Well, here came the Russian tanks. So that was it. We knew we didn't make it, we didn't escape, we got caught by the Russians. So we were sitting there for a little bit, and there was a lot of, Well, I would say roughly 20 tanks, because I think so because later on I was in the military in the United States, and I was a tanker. We had 20 tanks to a company. That's why I figured they had probably 20 tanks. So anyhow, so that they went by, a whole bunch of tanks went by, and they stopped. And there was a lot of the infantry guy, so they didn't have to walk. They were just sitting on top of the tanks, so they didn't have to walk. So one of the guys, another thing that of course what some of our people did, like I said, there was a whole colony of wagons, you know, or it was a little forest. We stopped, there was not a real dense forest, but a little forest where we stopped. And then when our people, when they saw that the Russians are here, they got off, jumped off the wagon, and ran into the forest. And that was a bad, bad mistake. Because then, you should see, they got down with the machine guns. Everyone was moving, they killed them. There were, I don't know how many people, but a lot of people in the forest that got killed by the Russians. They were trying to get away, running away, and they got killed there. And about 15 years ago, I went back to Poland, and I went back to that area too, and there's a big memorial there now for all the people who got killed there. And well, those, because the people, for some are fortunate, the ones that got killed right away, they were the lucky ones. But some of them were just wounded. But they were just laying there in the snow and slowly dying. There was no help for them. And that's something I will never forget in my life, when I saw the first real killing. Like as we stopped, and there were two guys in front of us, two older men, in the wagon in front of us. They got away from their wagon, and came back to our wagon, and it was just then they brought both of us, just then you can hold it on with one hand like that, to our wagon, standing off the street, you know. They were, because it was winter time, they had their overcoat on, and then one of those young Russian soldiers that jumped off the tank, he came over, started talking to those two guys in Russian, because they didn't understand him. So he opened that one guy's coat. Well, that guy had a uniform on. He was from the Volkssturm. But he was still had the old guys. There was Hitler's last secret weapon. Young guys, young kids, and old men. You know, he was still holding the Russian army back. And so he had that uniform on. And then that Russian guy knew even a few words of German. Because he said, "Oh, verfluchter Volkssturm. Oh, damn Volkssturm."
Volkssturm is a National Guard. Our father was in the army. No older people and no younger.
Yeah.
National Guard, so not heavy military.
He
Volkssturm.
will not really fall apart.
Yeah.
And so then he pulled his pistol, bang, let him have it. He fell over right away. And then the other guy, he raised his head and he started screaming, "Don't shoot." He gave him one. He didn't fall. He gave him another shot. He fell. Then he went over it, took his pistol and put the bullet right to their head. He made sure that they are dead. Like I said, it was the first thing I really saw dead close. And I was only 11 years old at that time. it was pretty tough.
Yeah, how old were you? 11?
Hmm?
How old were you? 11 at that time?
Around 11,
11
yeah,
years.
yeah, 45 years I was, yeah. Well, anyhow, I don't make it too long. And then, another thing I kind of got to mention that too. I then later turned out that finally someone told us turn around and go back to Poland where he came from. So we turned the wagon around, we started moving back, and we were going just, and it was getting late afternoon already. It was a beautiful day, I remember that. The sun was shining, but of course it was cold. And so we were going for a short distance. And at that time, the Russians still had a cavalry too, soldiers on horses. And I don't know why I heard it as a kid, but the Russians, the saber on the side, they are really dangerous guys because they take the thing and they cut your head off. And here was the cavalry coming, riding on horses. And said, oh my gosh, now they're going to cut our heads off. Well, sure enough, a whole bunch of the soldiers went by, and one of them stopped. Got off his horse, came over to my, I was driving my mom, and he started to say something because I didn't know what he was saying. So he looked at my horses, and then he started taking one horse off my wagon. And I was just sitting there, I didn't say anything, what can I say? And then he took, like I always said, somehow I think he was a nice guy. Even he took my horse. Then he took his horse and put it on my wagon, put all the gear on his horse in my wagon. That's what I say, he was a nice guy after all. And so then he put his saddle on my horse and took off. That was it. So we started moving again, back a little bit farther back. But then his horse had no shoes on, no studs in it. He was more of a hindrance now than a help to pulling the wagon. But I went only another half an hour, and we drove back another half an hour, and then we got stopped by the Polish, they call it Polish police. So then they asked us a few questions, and we told them, that's one thing, for the Polish language, I spoke real well at that time, because we were living in Poland for quite a while, and I spoke that language real well. And so he told us, we told him, we're going to go back where we came from, in Stefanov. And so whatever, there was not just one, there were about 3 or 4 guys. So they told us, get off the wagon. So we got off the wagon. There was my mom. The baby was a little bit over 1 year old. My brother was 5 years old, and I was 11 years old. So we got off the wagon, and fortunately, we were dressed very, very warm. We had just about all the clothes we could put on our body. We were putting them on. So we got off, and then he took the wagon and the horses and took off. So here we were standing on the street. And so Mom said, well, we gotta start walking. So we walked for a little distance, and it was almost getting dark. And Mom said, if we don't find shelter tonight, you're not gonna make it. that cold, that cold temperature, you know, that winter, said, we're not gonna make it out in the street tonight, you know. And so suddenly we did see a house, well, we saw a house with a light on. So we went over to that house, and like again, like I said again, you know, the Polish language was no problem now. So we knocked at the door, and I asked if he could stay overnight in that house. So the lady that came to the door, first she went back, and then she came again, and she said, well, he could stay, but not in the house. We gotta, but you will let us into the barn. We could stay in a barn. Said, well, we were happy about that. As long as we have in the barn a little bit of animals, it's still warm in there. And that's okay. So we went in there, and they were nice. She brought us a little food, she brought a little bit of milk for the little baby. And so we stayed there until, got overnight. Next morning she gave us a little more food again, and we started walking. And we walked in for quite a few days. And every night it was kind of the same story that whenever we stopped at a house, they took us in. Maybe because they saw the baby in a blanket, another little kid, you know, so they took us in, they let us stay. And so anyhow, we finally made it back to our house. And so I better go a little bit faster here. So we stayed in our house, or our ex-house, because there was some Polish living in there now. But they were nice again too. They took us in. They gave us one of the bedrooms so we could stay there. And the food was okay too, because actually there was a lot of food left there was our food anyhow in the house. Then when we left, you know, we left all that food behind. So there was part of our food anyhow. So they were feeding us. And so we were there for a few weeks. And then they put us in a camp, and that was, like, I can't go into all the details now, but they put us in a camp, and there was hard again. There were some real mean Polish people there, too. So we had a good work there on that place there, and, but we didn't go hungry. We had enough potatoes and enough sugar beets. We didn't see any meat or anything like that anymore, or sugar, nothing. That's what we were living on. But we can live on that too. We did not really go hungry. And then we were in that camp, in Polish camp, until the first part of December. And then they said, well, all the Germans are finally going to be released now, and they're going to ship us to Germany now. So, oh, we were just jumping for joy. Now we finally going to go back to Germany. So we had assembled at a depot in a county where the depot was. And when we got there, there were quite more and more people coming in. So we were staying here for about 3 or 4 days in some kind of a big building. There were a lot of people. Something was almost a regular reunion because a lot of those people were all from Friedenstal. And so they were all hoping, well, we're going to go to Germany now. And so some of the people here we hadn't seen for a long time, we didn't know they were still alive. So in some way it was kind of nice to see some of those old friends again. And so they finally told us to get over to the train station, and which we did. And here was a train sitting there with cattle wagons. So they told us to get in. And then there was, at that time, the trains usually had a sign outside the wagons, the destination. So some of the few old men, most of them were women and children, but some of the few old men who would speak a little Russian too, and they said, hey, I don't know if you're going to go to Germany. That sign doesn't say Germany. It says Brest-Litovsk. And Brest-Litovsk is the city, the border city between Poland and Russia. Sure enough, those old men were right. Instead of Germany, we went east. At Brest-Litovsk, we had to change trains, but it was just about the same cattle wagons again. And then we were almost a whole month on that train out to Siberia. And a lot of people on the way died. And then out there, of course, it was very tough. We were roughly 800 people when we started out on that train. And they said later on, after a few years, during the last people, the ones that did survive and came out of Germany, said roughly 2/3 of them died. Starvation, sicknesses, and starvation. So, anyhow, my family, myself, of course, my family, we were some of the lucky ones. Why, I don't know. Maybe this is the higher power true why we survived. We did survive, and we finally came to Germany again. Then I was in Germany for a few years, and then I immigrated to the United States. In '55, I came to this country, and I'm still around. Well, anyhow, thank you for listening to me. And, you got into the idea just how things looked like back in this Arabia too. Yeah.
What about your mother?
Danke. I apologize, it took a little long, but some of these stories were, exceptional, one of a kind. So, thank you, Bruno and Gudrun, and what war is about. That's why I'm a peacenik. You bend over backwards to be nice, and violence and glorification of violence. In my opinion, we have a little bit too much of that here, in my opinion. Okay, we're past having meals and so forth, and I apologize for running over, but these were exceptional stories, I think. So something to hear and remember, and to learn from. Okay, Dankeschön. You want to say a prayer, Alice?